Part 2.
Madam Chair, may I make one more point of order before they present? I'd like to be, I meant to be added to proposal 283, please. Thank you.
Good evening, councilors. While Sam pulls up our presentation, I will filibuster for a moment. I think today we are going to start, with your permission, Madam Chair, with our quarterly update.
That would be great.
So we have a quarterly update, as you all know, that we provide to the committee. And so we'll walk through that first before the budget presentation. I don't know if President Quick is still here. I think Steve had to leave for some family obligations, but I did want to note that just take a moment and note that President Quick took the time to come visit this evening in support, and certainly appreciate the relationship we have with our ASME local, both of our ASME locals at DPW. And also take a moment to acknowledge all of the hard-working men and women of DPW who are behind Sam and I here today. Sam and I have the privilege of sitting here and spending some time walking through the quarterly update and then our budget, but it's really the folks sitting behind us that are out there in the field every day that are managing the projects that our constituents want us to deliver on. And so I'm incredibly proud for the opportunity to lead this team, and feel privileged and want to thank them for being here on what hopefully isn't too late of an evening. So, Sam, I filibustered as long as I could.
We have the quarterly presentation over here somehow, so.
Okay.
I'm just going to connect to mine.
You know what that means? That means Jesse would be allowed to use eminent domain to kick me out of my home or any of your homes and put a park in place of it.
Yeah, thank you. Could somebody come help me with the picture?
I think this is needed to be.
There it is. Thank you.
All right.
Appreciate it. Okay.
All right. Well, I think we're ready to roll, Madam Chair, if you are. So I've already given a brief preamble, and it was a segue into the first slide here, Sam. Speaking of our team, part of the quarterly update every year is acknowledging both those folks either being promoted or coming into the department, and also acknowledging the folks that are leaving the department. And so you can see here a list of those transitions. Sam, to my right, has moved up into the Chief Financial Officer role, as Lauren Stevenson had moved into her Deputy Director role in the first quarter. You can see here Kaylee has moved from operations to solid waste. You all will recall that last year, as part of the budget, we created a new administrator level position at solid waste. So we're excited to have Kaylee join the solid waste team and help with a couple of really significant, substantial projects that we'll get into a little bit later during both the quarterly and the budget. Tim Cochran similarly transferred from engineering to operations to take over for Terry George, who has retired. And we're excited to have Tim rejoin operations to take over the traffic division. You see Shayna, who has moved up in her role at operations into a new leadership role, and we're excited to have her placed there. And then finally, Rachel, just in the past week or two, has joined us from Luna Language Services as our ADA Disability Affairs project manager. So welcome to the team. I mentioned Terry having chosen to retire, spend some more time with his motorcycle and his wife. And so hopefully he's out there somewhere enjoying the beautiful weather we've been having. Kevin was a mainstay at DPW for years and years, and I think a loss to the department that he is going to retire, but we wish him well in his retirement. And then Corey Olenkamp, for a personal matter or relationship, decided to move to Muncie and take a job at Ball State. So we're sorry to see him go. He leaves a gap with the communications team, and we're going to get into some of the wins that they've had this year. And to be sure, Corey was a major part of all those wins. So next slide, Sam. You'll see here, just briefly, we always include this slide in the quarterly. Sam will get specifically into this slide more during the budget presentation, but this is a visual representation of the revenue collected as a result of the road funding formula. And specifically, we'd call out here that this does include the additional appropriation relative to Senate Bill 283. Next slide, please. We quarterly provide information to you all about staffing. I'd note a couple things here. Number one, that solid waste vacancy number of 0, that's a huge win. That's a significant win for the department. And so a lot of hard work and attention from not just our administrative staff, but also the union side, attending job fairs, going out and beating the bushes looking for good candidates. Also the CDL training program, the referral bonus program that we have, and then the partnership with Keys to Work to get folks employed after incarceration. I will also acknowledge here the shortfall at Fleet. That continues to be a pain point for us, and it's something that we'll dive into a little bit more during the budget conversation. We'll talk about some of the wins here, just division by division briefly. So policy and planning. And most of this will be known to you all as counselors, but for the public here in the room tonight or the public viewing at home, want to make sure that we're sort of retelling the story of the last few months. So you'll know that we had the INEP award announcement earlier this year. We've also sort of reset the INEP program to include tactical urbanism and art in the right-of-way. And so we launched the community-powered infrastructure program this July. So those applications are open currently. And we've seen a tremendous, actually, very excited about the amount of response we've seen. So we believe there's going to be several viable projects. And I think it just demonstrates the need, the desire that our community has out there to partner with us to achieve their infrastructure goals. So we're excited about that. We are a little bit ahead of the curve as it relates to creating the lending library. One thing I'd note there is we've actually been reached out to by some national publications, national organizations, asking for more information about that lending library. It's a very creative approach, and one that really was a matter of our community coming alongside us and helping us and challenging us to think about these things creatively. So it's a true partnership with the public and something that nationally is being talked about as a best practice. I mentioned Rachel joining the team, so we're excited to have a project manager for disability affairs there. I'm going to go ahead and do something that a lot of folks probably wouldn't do sitting in this seat. I'm going to admit that I made a mistake. Last year, I think most of you know that I have a very personal connection to the disability community. My mother was in a wheelchair for a significant amount of time. I think I was looking for a needle in a haystack with a candidate that could both do the job we need that individual to fill and create magic and make miracles happen. And so I was a sort of a barrier to getting that position hired last year. This year I decided to let Natalie take the lead on that, and I want to thank Natalie and also Daniel Stevenson for making that a priority and getting that position filled. And I think we've got a great candidate who's going to be a tremendous value add to the team. Also, I just briefly mentioned here, I'm already getting long-winded, the Vision Zero ordinance, and then the fatal crash review team update that we provided earlier this year. I don't need to go on in detail about that. I think we've talked about that a lot here lately, and we'll continue to during the budget presentation. And then the solid waste RFP, why is that here under policy and planning? Daniel Stevenson, I'll give him another shout out, has been leading that effort just from a project management perspective. And so as all of you know, we have 10-year both disposal and hauler contracts up. Those existing contracts expire at the end of next year, and so we've been working through a process where by the end of next year we have contracts in place with, if there is a hypothetical vendor turnover, enough time for them to staff up, make whatever capital investment they need to, so that January 1st, 2026, when those new contracts would go into effect, there's ample time, ample runway to get it right. We know that this is an absolutely essential city service and one that we want to be ahead of. So we're more than a year out recompeting that work and working through that process now. Just yesterday, we had the hauler RFP go to the Board of Public Works for the 30-day public comment period that starts the process to then issue that RFP. And we're still actively in the negotiation stage with the disposal RFP, and that includes 3 separate RFPs: the disposal, recyclables, and organics. Communications, Kyle, I mentioned Corey having left the team. Kyle is leading the team that still includes Albany and Harrison, and we're lucky to have them. They've been doing a tremendous job. Just to toot their horn a little bit, I know that sometimes social media posts and things of that nature may not seem like a big deal, but it's one of the most proactive ways that we can engage with our public. And we've seen just an exponential increase in not just the number of posts, but the amount of engagement in those posts. And again, I'll toot their horn. Internally, the mayor's office has actually asked our team to go out and help other departments and agencies think about their social media engagement and how they do that. So our folks continue to shine there. You can see, speaking of shining, some of the unique characteristics of the built environment that we're able to add to our neighborhoods. That one in particular, that picture, that social media post was one that was shared widely across our community. And then finally, just thinking creatively and how we can better communicate, how we can be more proactive and not just talk about the built environment. We decided this year for back to school to do a public service announcement, and want to thank Councilor Nielsen for putting us in touch with Hannah Crutchfield's mom, Cassandra, who shared some time and was brave enough, courageous enough to share her story for a PSA. So if you haven't seen that, that's up on all of our social media networks. We can get that information to you if you'd like to share it with your networks. Just as we think about kids going back to school, trying to prioritize safety and get all users of our roadway to think about safety. Sam, if you want to try to play the video.
Yeah, do you want to play the... We had some technical difficulties.
Vehicles so they can start becoming more. Have a few wins to share with you. One of our fun ones most recently is that we hosted an EV ride and drive for all staff who drive a vehicle, a work vehicle. We partnered with Fleet on this, and we had a really great turnout. The goal was just to get some of our staff in the seats of these vehicles so they can start becoming more familiar with it as we think about our long-term strategy to transition vehicles. The current goal is to start to transition some of those pool vehicles that stay in our current facilities overnight rather than take-home vehicles. But more to come there, especially as we start to figure out what type of infrastructure is needed for accommodating new vehicles, as well as, of course, training for our fleet team. We have been aggressively pursuing many federal grants because of the unprecedented amount of funding available from the federal government through both the Investment Reduction Act and the bipartisan infrastructure law. And we've recently received some pretty good news on some of those grant opportunities. Over $100 million will be coming to Indianapolis through 2 different coalitions from the EPA for the Solar for All grant opportunities. We are a sub-applicant on one, and we're a partner on the other. The Indiana, or the statewide coalition that we're a sub, we will receive a couple $1 million to work on a community solar grant, a community solar project to put solar on a closed landfill. The other one that we are working as a close partner with some of our community partners, CICF, will actually be the sub where the money is going to, and we will be working with our partners to identify qualifying households to put solar on the rooftops of those homes. Really cool projects that we're really proud and excited about. Additionally, we've received a smaller grant, $15,000, from the Urban Sustainability Directors Network to support climate programming. This is one of the first instances where we were able to start programming climate education in our parks, and that was called the Thriving Neighbors series. It was a really great initiative that our community engagement manager took on over the past couple of months. Most recently, that grant has also supported the purchasing of cooling kits to distribute to residents that might not have access to AC. That's a really important topic that we're starting to message more about, just around extreme heat during these long summer hot months. Lastly, we were also selected for this DOE Energy Future Grant. We are receiving $500,000 for a planning grant, and we're partnering with other cities statewide to understand what type of resources are needed to ensure that our built environment is performing as efficiently and optimal as possible. Thanks. Happy to take questions afterwards.
Thank you. We'll move on to the operations division and walk briefly through some of the things that our teams, our boots on the ground, have been up to. So you're all familiar with how we like to put our best foot forward in support of our major events across the city, and specifically downtown in a lot of cases. And so you can see here a list of sort of what we've been up to. I would mention that beginning, I think it was All-Star Weekend, and going all the way through when Taylor Swift comes after, when Taylor Swift comes to town after the FFA convention, our folks don't have a single weekend off, right? So this is hard work. This is not just about filling potholes, responding to trees in the right-of-way. We are supporting our city's economic development. We are supporting what makes our city the type of city that will compete for, another All-Star game, the WNBA All-Star game that was just announced that we're going to have the opportunity to host next year. So incredibly proud of the crews. You can see here, I don't need to read to you all of the different metrics, all the different numbers. I would also mention that Natalie Van Dongen is officially the Deputy Director of Swift Affairs. So if you want to know who's running point for the Taylor Swift show from DPW, it is Natalie. So I defer to her. From a solid waste perspective, again, you saw in the staffing numbers a major win there. I would just note that you heard us talk about during our first Q1 presentation at the beginning of the year that we were going to make safety a priority across all divisions. And so you can see here what our solid waste division has done in regard to safety over the last quarter. Also, it's worth mentioning this is a huge deal to the folks who are out there working every day and those managing, trying to make sure that we're picking up trash across our jurisdiction, that we've received some more trucks, so we've been able to add to the fleet this year and are going to continue to pursue those capital investments moving forward. KIB cleanups, it's not just about the day-to-day trash service, it's also about supporting neighborhood cleanups, supporting the BNS cleanups that they do as well. Next slide. This is really the big ticket item, and I hope all of you are as excited as we are about this. I know that Zach has done a great job trying to get counselors out to see the different garages. I believe you all were given the opportunity to go out to the solid waste garage earlier this year. We are officially going to be breaking ground in September on the new solid waste garage. I want to specifically thank Lauren Stevenson and Sean Brock for pulling this project across the finish line. There were some challenges last year that we faced that we had to work through, but we were able to do so. It's also worth mentioning that we have a CMC on that project, Powers & Sons, who is an MBE, so that's a big one, I think, from a diversity perspective and an equity perspective. So that's a almost $15 million vertical structure, not including the site work. So we're incredibly excited I know the crews more so than anyone are incredibly excited to see that start to go vertical, and we look forward to updating you on the progress there. And I've already touched on the procurement for new hauler and collection contracts. I don't need to belabor that. Next slide. Forestry and stormwater ops, again, I think a lot of you have had the chance now to get out and visit with the crews and see what day-to-day is like. I would specifically mention that earlier this year we were informed we were going to go through an audit process that kind of shook everyone a little bit, right? When you find out that Big Brother's going to come in and peer over your shoulder, it draws some attention and some scrutiny. And so we rose to that challenge. I want to thank Shannon and Gail and Tim and Lacey and everyone who worked so hard to get us prepared. I think the item inspection went incredibly well, and that's for our MS4 permit, which is an incredibly important permit that the city holds. And so if that were to be put in jeopardy, it'd be a very, very substantial problem for the city. So a great job by everyone who was involved with that, above and beyond what you see here as far as the day-to-day routine work that our folks are asked to do. Again, 24/7, right? A storm may come after midnight, and that means our folks are on call, and that means that they're usually on call all summer long. And so, again, just want to shout out that hard work, and don't need to read the stats to you here. From an environmental services perspective, you can see, again, the stats. We have decided to move forward with reinvesting in the existing tox drop facility in Perry Township. We need more capacity, we need more storage, and so that bid, I believe, has been awarded. The contract's not yet in place. That contract will go to board next month, but we are moving forward with investing in that facility, in that tox drop facility, because it is an essential service. And you can see here again some of the outreach events we've held, the e-scrap event, specifically there at Cranor Park. From a traffic signs and marking and signal perspective, you can see some of the highlights here. This is where Tim Cochran has been newly installed as the leader of that operation, and we're excited to see where he takes it. We've had some already just preliminary conversations about ways maybe we can retool and rethink our processes, and you'll hear us talk a little bit in budget about how we're going to repurpose some FTEs so that we can get more folks out there, be more responsive to some of the calls that we get as far as crosswalks, things of that nature. Just as we continue to think about how we prioritize safety, we think there's some things that we can do that we'll be prepared to talk about in the coming months with Tim at the helm there. Sweeping, the big news here is really that we continue to invest in meaningfully in our sweeper fleet. So 3 new sweepers have been acquired that are called the Badger sweepers. There's been 1 Bear sweeper and then 1 pure vacuum sweeper. The vacuum sweeper is important because that will allow us to do certain types of drains that we haven't been able to do before. We've had to contract that out through CEG. So by taking that in-house, that's going to be more efficient. It's going to cost us less money. So that's a net positive. And then the team had a little bit of fun putting together the difference between a broom and a bear, a Badger and a Bear sweeper here.
I hope that clarifies things for everybody.
Yeah. So if you can imagine a bear or a badger, you can, this was Terry before he left, this was Terry's way he phrased it. If you can imagine what a bear would do versus what a badger would do to try to get at something, tear something out, that's kind of the distinction there. So we are diversifying our fleet, and we're excited to be able to do more work. So from a street operations perspective, we got to have a little bit of fun with this, right? It gets a little long. So from a street operations perspective, this is probably where most of your constituents are paying the closest attention to us day in and day out. Incredibly proud of the work that everyone's been up to all summer. 19 specific D4 projects. I saw Nathan in the back there. Nathan leads those crews for us, and so a huge shout out to D4. I think some of you also had the opportunity to go out and visit that garage. Operations has also removed 325 tons of illegal dumping. So I think that underscores just how significant of an issue that is across the county, because we know we're not getting to everything. But to be clear, we are hard at work, and we are addressing the issues that we're aware of and that we can. And then finally there you see the up-to-date pothole numbers as of just yesterday. Fleet, we're proud that our fleet division continues to compete across the country and actually across, I think, all of North America, and is ranked 50th as 50th in best public fleets in the Americas, and that's a marked improvement from last year. So despite the challenges that we have from a staffing perspective, we continue to compete, we continue to be recognized, and you can see there just the scale of our operation. 2,800 work orders, that's more work orders fulfilled than last year at this time, and managing over 5,000 different pieces of equipment. It's not just police cars, it's not just our solid waste vehicles, it's across the board. It's small engines, and as we continue to invest more and more in battery-powered technology, those skill sets are also changing, and so we're going to need to continue to invest in the personnel and equipment to maintain such a diverse fleet. And you can also see there the shout out that the item inspection specifically looked at some of the facilities there at the Riverside Garage, and so I know the team did a great job getting everything ready for that inspection, and again, shout out to them for that hard work. Here we thought it'd be fun just to include some pictures of you all out in the field, and shout out to Zach for thinking about this early on and getting you all the opportunity to go out and see what it's like. In the street with us. So we'll move to engineering as we exit the operations portion here. So some significant milestones just to share with you over the last couple months. We did finish the West Michigan Road Diet project, and so I know the neighborhood is happy to see the orange barrels and orange cones get out of the way out there. There's still some finishing touches, like some cosmetic work, some of the landscaping work yet to do, but for all intents and purposes, that is substantially complete. 79th and Dean, Councilor Boots, I know that this was a huge priority for you. We talked even last fall, well before construction season started, about the need to make sure that, given the proximity of the elementary school there, that we were out of the way before school started. And honestly wasn't sure we would get it done, but we were able to. Not me, no sense of ownership there, but glad we were able to make that happen. As Nathan referenced, the Post and Raymond roundabout, that work just started. So a whole wide range of projects across the county, just some of them here that we're highlighting. You all, I think, had seen the announcement earlier this year from the MPO. We received more money than last year, the most money that we've ever received. And as you know, the MPO funding, similar to the road funding formula, the state road funding formula, is an area where we put in more than we get back. And so we're glad to continue to be really aggressive there, really competitive there, and receive more money, even though we're not yet receiving sort of our fair share. And a couple of grants here that I won't belabor because we are going to get into these more in the future, but continue to be competitive at a federal level with grants, going to continue to pursue options. Councilor Cahill referenced one earlier. I know there are other INDOT and state level options as well that we're going to continue to pursue. We do have now a fully staffed urban forestry division. That is an area that you all agreed with us as we saw sought to invest more in last year's budget, so that division now is fully staffed. The Greenways Master Plan update is underway. This is something we do every 10 years, and so Gretchen Zortman on our team is leading that effort and standing up a steering committee that will, as Councilor Mowry, I'm recalling last year during budget season in conversations both prior and since, about lack of trail infrastructure investment in Franklin Township. This is that master plan that I think it would be a great idea for councilors that want to make sure something is captured in the 10-year plan, that then as we seek to invest dollars on in the future, we have that sort of blueprint and that guideline, that expectation. That's the plan that I would point folks to. There's going to be public engagement opportunity. And so more to come on that. Get with us if you have specific interest there so we can make sure we loop you in. White River Innovation District, Henry Street Bridge. Chairwoman Jones and I have talked a lot about this for the past 2 years, really over the summer as well. We're moving forward with the Henry Street Bridge. We were lucky enough to receive investment from the endowment, and that project has been, for a variety of reasons, complicated. But I think we've shifted our approach. We've been very creative, worked very closely with the community, and we're really excited to have begun actually now work on the bridge itself and moving forward with what we committed to the community. And so I'm incredibly thankful for Chairman Jones' support and for all the hard work that the team. Shannon Killian has become the project manager after Erica Miller left us last fall. And so Shannon specifically, a shout out for all the hard work in continuing to move forward with that project. Finally, the DOT software is something, again, we're trying to recall what we brought up with you all and asked you to invest in last year during budget. DOT software was something we talked a lot about. This is what over time is going to allow us to make fully data-informed decisions. And we've been in the process of implementing that DOT software. And right now where we're at is the stage where we're implementing all of the data that we have into the system so that then it can begin to analyze and offer the suggestions that it can offer as far as maintenance versus capital budget and building out a long-term plan. Finally, fatal crash review team in spring fiscal. Since the last quarterly update, we had a very significant amount of work that we've done together relative to pedestrian safety. And so just a friendly reminder and to you all and a reminder to, or maybe for the first time, folks hearing it at home, the fatal crash review team, we updated our practices there as a result of the ordinance you all passed in January. And where we are today is the concept of the road safety audit. And so we're looking intersection by intersection based on data and prioritizing intersections based again on data that we believe a road safety audit will warrant a perhaps a new treatment that can improve safety at those intersections. I believe Councilor McCormick had the opportunity to actually attend a road safety audit just today, and so that work continues. I think we're up to our third intersection now that we've identified since updating the fatal crash review team process. And I would point out that when you all crafted that ordinance and passed that ordinance in January, the call was to have that in place by next January. You gave us a year, and we thank you for that partnership. We thank you for hearing us that we wanted to make sure we had enough time to get it right. But we've actually been able to get that implemented and moving, and so we're on to our third intersection already. The MyoVision Scout technology, the procurement is in process for this. This was money that you allocated in the spring fiscal. And this is technology that's going to allow us to not only see what's happening at intersections in a way that we've been thinking about it historically, but it's also going to allow us to see, this is the technology that allows us to see near misses, near crashes, because that data isn't something that we currently incorporate in our decision making and our planning. So we're excited to see that technology implemented. I know specifically we're looking at the 38th Street corridor. I know Councilor Barth doesn't sit on this committee, but that's something we've been talking to him a lot about over the past summer months. And so we're doing that in partnership with stakeholders in that area, and also CICF is involved in a grant that we have for that corridor. And then I would just note that that technology is mobile, and so once that corridor, once we move through that corridor, we have the opportunity to move that technology to other intersections. The driver feedback signs, these are what we talked about in the spring fiscal, that we want to partner with you all in thinking about placement. And these are the signs that will, as you drive by, will let you know if you're driving the speed limit, speeding, that there's radar technology that will give you your current speed. You can see here, this is in Councilor Gibson's district, an example of the quick curb. So we purchased quick curb, and I know this is something that advocates and folks that are very interested in Vision Zero and what other communities have been calling on the department to do. And so again, we as we talked about in the spring, we didn't wait for budget just because that's the convenient time to ask for more money. We came to you all back during the spring fiscal time and asked for the ability to purchase these materials, and have already begun implementing that even outside of last year's budget introduction. And so we look forward to, I believe actually the M&A sent me an email just in the last 2 days indicating that the feedback from the community was this is working. They're incredibly happy with the technology. It's a noticeable difference from the residents living in the adjacent right-of-way, or adjacent to the right-of-way. And so we look forward to be able to doing these treatments at intersections across the county moving forward. Again, the lending library, we're in the procurement process there. We believe that the lending library will be stocked up by the time this current round of CPI that grant opportunity ends, so that we'll have that lending library in place as we seek to partner with community organizations moving forward on CPI projects. The $1 million for street lighting adjacent to school districts, we're still collecting all the data and trying to map out, that's where we are today, is mapping out where existing assets are and where school districts are, so that then we can have an informed discussion with you all about prioritization. And then finally, the 10 proposed school intersection locations, you can see here that we've determined those locations and are just working through the specifics on design at this point. Finally, as we do throughout the construction season, we provide you an update of the projects that are in this year's capital plan, and I won't belabor this. I certainly don't need to read each one to you. The complete projects, that first slide is obviously completed projects. In progress are in progress. Yet to start are projects that have been put to bid and under contract, but yet to start, and then future projects that are still yet to bid this year. And so with that, I will be quiet for a moment and see if anyone has any questions about the quarterly update.
Councilor Nielsen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Director Herget, I had just two quick questions on the spring fiscal slides. So first was on the quick curb, where does, I was looking through the spring fiscal documents, where did that, how was that, where did that come from? Was that a specific, was it a specific project, or is it out of a specific fund? Because I mean, I was just telling Councilor Gibson, I drove by this just, gosh, probably was last week, and it's fantastic. So I just was wanting just to learn a little bit more about, I know where that came from. If anyone knew, we can follow up too. Yeah.
Thank you, Council Member. Thank you, Council Member. So as you pointed out, the quick curb was part of the spring fiscal, which included a variety of both new money but also reallocations within existing budget to address, key safety priorities throughout the county. The quick curb component wasn't appropriated for a specific location, but this fiscal gave us flexibility to begin to roll out these types of projects in a way that would. I wouldn't characterize it as a pilot, but begin to utilize this technology, and hopefully going forward we'll have more opportunities to make use of these types of components.
Yeah, I agree. I think these are the kind of, as the name says, quick, these quicker, more responsive projects that we can deploy that also look pretty good as well. Like they also fit in with just the built environment while also being very, very effective. Madam Chair, one more question. For the MyoVision, is this technology that could be used for other purposes if we were permitted to?
I see. Yeah, I see where you're going with that. Nathan, I don't know if you have the right answer. I could speculate.
Thanks, Nathan.
Yeah, so I'm kind of speculating that you're thinking more like from a red light running perspective. So I think the best way to utilize this piece of technology would be for us to identify when red light running is happening, and then better utilize deployment of IMPD, so that we've pinpointed that we have a problem between 4 and 5 p.m. It allows us to really drill down on the specifics as well. If we have a problem with red light running in the evenings, perhaps for westbound traffic, maybe it's a situation where people are having a problem seeing the traffic signal indications, and so it allows us to look at the excuse me, the times that those tend to be a problem, and better deploy officers.
Thank you.
Councilor Carlino.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you so much, Director Herget and team, for your presentation. I have a couple of questions about the allusion to capital set aside for the solid waste contracts. My questions are around the capital that the city has set aside. If not cash, do we have any assets that we're putting on the table as possibilities to share with or utilize or activate with regard to hauling, processing, creating a soil bank or other sites for composting as far as our future recycling is concerned?
So I'll take a stab at an answer, and then if there's anyone on the team who has a more complete answer, please feel free to step up. So I believe there were similar questions asked during the public comment period for the disposal, specifically, for example, around the concept of would the city potentially provide land in the event that a transfer station were necessary or something to that effect. And we would want to be good partners, obviously, to whoever was going to contract with us to provide these services. So I don't think anything precludes us from any of those conversations. And again, if someone has a more complete answer who's been more in the weeds with the RFP process, please feel free to give a more complete answer. But I would caution before Natalie steps up to say, given that these are open currently and that we're in a negotiation phase, I would hesitate to get into any specificity about what we could put on the table or not put on the table here in this setting, just given the sensitivity of negotiation.
Yes, hi all, Natalie Van
Hi,
Dongen,
Natalie.
Deputy Director of Policy and Planning. As Brandon noted, I'm not going to be able to speak to many specifics just because it is still open. However, I will include that organics were part of that RFP process, specifically on processing side as well. And a lot of that was due to wanting to know what kind of market availability there was for this kind of infrastructure. So that has been explored through this process, and we'll have more to say in the coming months.
Thank you, Natalie, and thank you, Director. I know, Madam Chair, that in terms of land use and development, the Sherman Park request for master developer, no one put forth a proposal, and so we have a brownfield site on the Near East Side that I heard alluded to earlier. There are some funds about building and on top of former landfills and things like that, and I didn't know if brownfield sites were eligible or if it was very stringent on must have been a landfill in the past type situation. So I'd be curious offline to learn more about that. But my final comment, Madam Chair, is actually about the historic NPO funding and how this was sort of a record year. And I just have to commend the team for that, because grant funding is so crucial, federal and otherwise, for this department specifically. And I just want to say I hope that the city and that the council and even the administration recognizes just the amount of hard work and diligence it takes to get not only some of these federal DOT dollars and MPO dollars, but even Director Mickelson and her team making sure they're harnessing EPA dollars as well. So the federal grants and the other things that this team is going for is absolutely crucial, and I have to commend the team, and I hope that this year, this MPO year, isn't just a banner year, but it becomes our new norm and standard, because what I think that this team is doing and our city is doing is really building a credibility for what we value in terms of safety and connectivity and what we're prioritizing in our city and county. So thank you so much, Director Herget, to you and your team. Look forward to supporting more of those in the future. With that, I think I yield my time, Madam Chair.
Councilor Boots.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple shout outs before I have a question. Recently, there's just been some spectacular performance by DPW in my area. The Dean Road roundabout, as you mentioned, Director, initially started out as a very contentious, controversial project. The neighbors were fed up with the construction, the road closures. Then school was coming around the corner, and this intersection is right between two elementary schools that are only a mile apart. So this would have totally strangled all traffic. And your people worked double time to open it up by 8 p.m. the night before school started. So that was spectacular. And the people in the neighborhoods are very, very grateful. And I've gotten a lot of compliments that I have shared and deflected all that accolades to you guys in DPW. And I really appreciate that. Another one was a simple thing, car accident, stop signs, street signs knocked down on a corner. That was a school bus stop. Parents were very upset. Happened on a Friday, and then they were afraid of the kids Monday morning. By Monday noon, the signs were replaced, stop sign was up, bus stop was safe. So I really commend you guys for that performance. And also just tailgating on this discussion of MPO money. That has been a spectacular shot of steroids in the area. We're fortunate of a pedestrian bridge for the nickel plate over Keystone, which was going to be an insurmountable challenge for us to do on our own. So without that DPW working with MPO, I don't think that would have been achieved for the anytime in the near future. My quick question is, with respect to major special events, all that manpower, and are any of the stakeholders or groups putting on these events footing any of these labor costs, or is there a permit charge or anything so that all that is not falling exclusively on taxpayers' shoulders?
Yeah, so that permitting process runs through BNS, and there certainly are fees collected and certainly ways that the city does receive some compensation. I also think it's fair to point out that not equal to the services we provide, right? And so that there's certainly a discussion to be had there. From my experience, both at the city and prior to the city, I think it's sort of a known how dependent the city of Indianapolis and the state of Indiana are on our tourism industry. It's why this council is consistently asked to consider supporting that industry. And so we're proud to do our fair share. We're proud to support it. But I think it is a fair point to point out that, it is a burden on our operations. And it's something that long-term we need to be thoughtful about how much we're committing to supporting special events in downtown and what a strain that puts on our city's resources. So where we are today, we can absolutely meet the need that's placed on us. But long-term, it's something that, as you all as the council, I would recommend keep an eye on. We're certainly keeping an eye on it.
And I would just add, I think that is something that we as a council should look at more closely. I've had this discussion with Chief Bailey. We are spending millions in additional overtime money for IMPD for all these events that are being held often by pseudo-public-private stakeholders. So the taxpayers are footing the bill for them putting on their events. So I think it behooves us to look at that more closely in the future so that you get your proper funding and IMPD gets its proper funding, because that's also adding to our officer shortage. So. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And if I may, Councilor Boots, just to respond to your first point about the roundabout, not to belabor it, but just for the purposes of the discussion and the public at home, I think thank you for that. Kudos. Thank you also for bringing us to the table. I remember meeting out there at Northview Church, I think October of last year, and we, by getting to us early and having that conversation and bringing in all the stakeholders that we needed to, it gave us the amount of time necessary to make sure that we built out the construction timeline in a way that met the expectation that you and the community had. So thank you, sir, for bringing everyone together so that we were able to have a successful project.
Councilor Cahill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On the fatal crash review team, now that is being expanded to do a monthly review of a specific intersection, is there a process where the counselor for that intersection will be notified and invited to that? I know they're public, but to that meeting, or could we do that?
Absolutely, Councilor McCormick.
Madam Chairwoman, if I could. So I went to this morning or this afternoon. I think it was I wasn't the winner. It was unfortunate counselor that ended up with, in a 2-month window, the most dangerous intersection with fatalities and incapacitating injuries. And so I was invited. Zach joined as well. We had paperwork. We went over. They talked about the process and what went through. And I hope that none of you get that, but I know if you do, I would encourage my colleagues to attend and ask those questions because it's informative and important work to do.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
I would add too, if there's interest, Councilor Cahill, just register that with Zach, and as I think Councilor McCormick rightly pointed out, hopefully it doesn't happen in your district, but I think the next time there's a road safety audit, any counselor that would want to come out and be in the field and learn about it, I think we'd be more than happy to have you join us.
Thank you. Any other questions on the quarterly update for Director Herget? All right, ready for the budget presentation.
All right, now the real fun begins. Well, the first slide here will look very familiar to you all, as it was the way we started the conversation last year. And so I will start this evening by addressing the elephant in the room, which is this is a live within our means budget. And it was a live within our means budget last year from a capital perspective. This year it's a live within our means budget, not just from a capital perspective, but an operational perspective as well. You can see here represented both visually and in text the challenge that we face. We are tasked with maintaining 8,400 lane miles while we receive funding back from the state for approximately 3,400 of those lane miles. That's a challenge that none of us are responsible for, but all of us have to live with and accept and work through the best that we can. Next slide, please. Despite that challenge, you can see how through working together over the past several years now, we've been able to significantly increase and sustain high levels of infrastructure investment in our city. And again, I think that is a true testament to the partnership that this administration has had with the council. It's a testament to the work, as you all just alluded to, in punching above our weight with the MPO, in being aggressive about federal funding, and then getting creative when it comes to revenue sources, debt issuance, and specifically when we get creative with those revenue sources, doing so in a way that is taxpayer friendly, that is mindful of future obligations, and so we continue to maintain a healthy credit rating. Here is a representation of, since 2016, what that investment has brought the county. And then in 2024, you can see the investments we're making element by element in our city's infrastructure. And what I'd point to here briefly is the last bullet point, which is residential streets. So as you all know, and for the viewing public at home, over the last 3 years, we've been able to invest in residential streets in a way that we hadn't in a generation. And so there were 3 separate fiscal packages that this council, I think, passed unanimously in each case. And now this year, for the first time, thank you to Senator Freeman and other members of the General Assembly who worked with us on fixing the population count issue with the road funding formula through Senate Bill 283. We now have a dedicated revenue source to put towards residentials. And we'll get into this in a little bit in the future, but in the future of this presentation, but that Senate Bill 283 also requires a match from the local unit equal to the increase in the road funding distribution And so where we are today is we have a $16 million dedicated revenue source towards residentials. And so we talked about this actually during the fiscal earlier. I believe it's Proposal 283, but we have some lessons learned. So there are wins with that investment in residentials. We've had nearly 400 residential segments either constructed or currently in design. That's a substantial number when you think about how historically we hadn't done any residentials in a generation. That's more than 35,000 linear feet of rehab sidewalk adjacent to those parcels. You can see the ADA accessibility that has been improved. And finally, again, a reminder that that's 3 years worth of residential programming. So we've learned some lessons, and we fine-tune our approach now that we have a dedicated revenue source. And John is in the audience here, and want to shout him out, our chief engineer, John Bowen. At the beginning of the year, as we discussed now having a dedicated revenue source moving forward, I tasked him with determining how we make this as efficient and fair and equitable as possible. And so what you're seeing us, this is new news, what you're seeing us launch this evening is what we're calling the complete neighborhood approach. So just as you all have challenged us to think about complete streets along thoroughfares, and in that context, thinking about all users of roadway and infrastructure, as we start to look at residentials moving forward as a city, we're going to take a complete neighborhood approach. So what does that mean? A complete neighborhood is one that includes an analysis of stormwater infrastructure, and it includes an analysis of pedestrian infrastructure inside each neighborhood. You can see here spelled out in text, but just to briefly describe, what we've done is we have segmented the county into 4 different sectors, and what we are moving forward going to do is use the scarce resources that we have, that $16 million a year allocation, to invest in each sector each year. As we move through each sector, we will be able to do a complete neighborhood, so this new complete neighborhood approach, in each council district, in each sector per year. So every 4 years, you as a city councilor hearing me, what does that mean to you? What does that mean to your constituents? That means every 4 years, you will see a complete neighborhood rehabbed in your district with this complete street, complete neighborhood approach. That is making do with the scarce resources we have in an equitable way, what we believe is going to be the most efficient, best use of those taxpayer dollars moving forward. We're confident in that approach, and we're excited to begin working with you to make data-driven decisions on where we then choose to invest those dollars in what neighborhoods in your districts moving forward. So with that, I've talked well more than enough here in the last hour plus, and I'm going to turn it over to Sam to get in the weeds on the budget with you before I close this out.
Thank you, Brandon. Thank you, members of the committee. I'm excited to chat a little bit about our 2025 budget and our financial outlook going forward tonight. As Brandon mentioned previously in his remarks, we would characterize this as a time to live within our means. And so this first couple slides walks through the department's major funding sources, which you can see kind of the biggest pieces of that pie are up on the slide in front of you. So the next few slides break this out into a little bit more detail, but what I would call your attention to here are the percentages on the right side of the screen. And what you'll notice is that for our major revenue components, this is pretty modest growth that we're expecting in 2025. So when you're looking at percentages like 0.5% up to 3.5%, Those are the constraints that we have to construct a budget around. And so we took this challenge seriously, making sure to emphasize our priorities and your priorities. But, you know, realistically, this is what the department has to work around as we look at our operating and capital budgets. So again, members of this committee are pretty familiar at this point with the state road funding formula and how this works. This is mostly gas tax, but there's some other fees mixed in with that funding stream. This shows our prior year collections from this source and what we're expecting in 2025. As you'll see, we had growth of about 10% so far this year. That was expected based on the state legislative changes from the last session that Brandon discussed a few slides ago. That was the fix to the road funding formula that corrected some historical issues with Indianapolis's population count. So that was the good news. We got the money from that. That is great. However, looking forward to 2025, we're projecting, again, fairly modest growth of a couple percentage points. The reason we're projecting that growth at all is due primarily to future increases in the state gas excise tax and special fuel tax rates, which adjust for inflation each July through 2027 pursuant to state statute. Next, we have our stormwater utility fee. This is a user fee that's billed to all property owners in Marion County. For most people, it's included on their tax bills, and it's based on the amount of impervious surface area that their property holds. So fortunately for us, this rate does adjust each year for inflation through 2034. And so based on that, we do expect continued modest but reasonable growth of about 3.5% next year. There are some year-to-year fluctuations due to things like the pandemic and certain other changes to the district collection rates, things like that, but mostly it's a pretty steady source of revenue. This next chart shows historical revenue collections from our solid waste fee. Like the stormwater fee before it, this is a user fee billed primarily through tax billing. Unlike the stormwater fee, this rate is flat at $32 per unit per year, again, only for residential property in the county. So mostly it's a stable revenue source. That said, there are some year-to-year fluctuations due to things like collection rates. We also maintain the billing database that this is based off of. And we've made it a big area of emphasis in recent years to ensure that all eligible properties are paying what they owe in this fee and not slipping through the cracks. And to that end, we do hope to collect $9 million for the first time in 2025. But again, these are pretty trivial increases in the grand scheme of a budget that's hundreds of millions of dollars in total resources. So that's kind of a breakdown of where we sit with our major revenue components, and that informs the slides to come, which are going to talk about our 2025 budget, how that compares to the 2024 budget. Some of these issues are going to be substantive. Some of them are going to be fairly technical. I'm going to try to focus your attention on real changes and explain where variances could be misleading. The next few slides get into this in a little bit more detail. The main thing that you'll notice here looking at this, though, is that in 2025, our budget is, technically speaking, $14.7 million higher than 2024, which if you have your calculators out, that's actually more than a 6% increase. And so if you're looking at the last slides and thinking, well, revenue growth was not 6%, how can that be? A big piece of this is what Brandon has been discussing. So this includes federal and state funding and other funding from external sources. So in here, you're going to see increases based on that. Aside from those things, the increases are going to be driven by contractual increases, staff cost assumptions, and some technical changes that I can allude to here on this next set of slides. Character 1, this is costs for staff, people. The $2.5 million increase that you see here is driven by a cost of living adjustment assumption from the controller's office, assumptions for healthcare cost increases, and a placeholder budget to help cover the costs of new collective bargaining agreements next year. These agreements are not yet complete. They are still in negotiation, so we don't know what the final cost of those salary adjustments will be. For now, it is handled in this budget through placeholder numbers that we've worked in tandem with the Controller's Office to determine. Ultimately, once those agreements are complete, that will be a discussion between union leadership, DPW leadership, the Controller, on how to address those increases through what's already included in the budget and if any further adjustments are necessary. The budget does include a few new positions. Only 3 of them are fully new in terms of FTE count. And while that is not a high number from a historical perspective for a big department like ours, they do address some of the key priorities and commitments that we've made both to this body and to other community stakeholders, members of the public. And so to that end, one of those big additions is going to be a Vision Zero administrator. We've talked about Vision Zero at other points in Brandon's remarks. It will come up again further down in this presentation, so I won't belabor it here, but this position will be the key staff member that will coordinate Vision Zero activities across our department, across other city agencies, and with members of the public. So very excited to be adding this position to our team. We're also adding 2 FTEs to our trails maintenance group. This is a fairly new part of DPW's team. I believe it will bring the total FTE count from 8 to 10. This is something that we hope to continue to address in the future. We know this is a big priority of the council, and in line with historical investments we are making and plan to continue to make in our greenways, maintaining them is obviously going to be a key priority, and that takes people, and so we're happy to be able to add members to that team. Not totally new to from an FTE standpoint, but new to this team and to the department will be an additional forestry analyst for the urban forestry team. This is a reprogrammed position from elsewhere in the city's budget, but still wanted to call it out here because it is an addition to our capacity in an important area where we've seen increased staffing needs and will continue to in the years to come. Character 2, this is cost for supplies and materials. You're going to see a net variance that's actually negative and pretty small. There are some shifts within individual divisions. I would characterize these as fairly technical, but since they're on there, and in case you have questions, the decrease for operations is a reflection of underspend the last couple years for certain materials, especially road salt. And so, as Brandon said, as I said earlier, this is a live within our means budget. This does mean that hard choices have to be made, reallocating funding away from areas where there has been underspend into areas of need like upcoming collective bargaining agreements and healthcare cost increases and things like that. So what I will say on that point is we're fully stocked on road salt. Our road salt barns are currently close to full, and we have budget in 2025 and beyond to continue to purchase that and to be prepared for inclement weather during the snow seasons to come. There is an increase for fleet services here. Again, I would characterize this as right sizing of a budget that has not been sufficient to cover annual costs the last couple years. There have been fiscal actions approved by council a couple times to address spending on fleet. As we all know, costs have increased over the last few years, and budget hasn't necessarily kept pace with this. So this isn't any planned new expansion or anything. It is a realignment of their budget to reflect recent realities. Character 3, this is services and contractual costs. There's a lot of numbers swinging in different directions here. You have the numbers in front of you, but I'm going to turn to the next slide, which talks about some of these things, I think, a little bit more clearly. For engineering, as I discussed, there's additional budget in place to spend federal dollars. Character 3 is not capital, it is professional services, contractual costs, and things like that, but some of the federal programming is for things like that. We'll talk a little bit more later about the USDA urban forestry grant, but spending for that is envisioned in this budget, and that's included in Character 3. Increases for operations and solid waste are contractually driven, so things like our collection contract with our vendors, these have annual escalators. The budget accommodates those things. Fleet services, that's going to be a similar change to what I just discussed on the Character 2 slide a second ago. And the policy and planning division shows a pretty significant decrease. So while these things are technical, I just wanted to call out that those are not in my mind, a real substantive reduction. It's more reallocation of budget based on some under the hood stuff that I'm happy to get into if anybody wants me to at this point, but otherwise I will leave it there. Character 4, this is capital outlays, obviously a very important part of our budget and what we do. You see the big, almost $9 million variance here on the table in front of you. Again, this is largely driven by federal dollars in the engineering division. Wanted to call out a couple things specifically, both congressionally directed spending that we've received through the last couple cycles that's included in this budget and a big part of the variance, and then also the state exchange program for federal road funding. This is a change from prior practice where typically INDOT would bid federal aid construction projects and carry those expenses on their books. And under the state exchange program, we actually carry those expenses on our books. So that is, again, kind of an accounting thing, but it is an important win for our department. It's helped us in all sorts of operational ways with administering federal aid programs, and it's a win that we're very excited about and a program we're very happy with. So with that, I'm going to move to my final budget variance slide. This is Character 5. Character 5 is divisional chargebacks, and this is probably the most difficult part of the budget to explain or understand, even if you work with it.
Oh boy, this should be fun then.
What you'll see is a variance very close to zero. That's because with chargebacks, some divisions are paying for costs associated with other divisions. So it's supposed to net out when you line it all up. What you will notice is a big negative number for fleet and positive numbers for the other. That's because fleet is chargeback funded, so it shows up as a negative cost to them. That means they're actually getting money from our other divisions, and the other divisions are paying for the use of the fleet services division. So with that,
that wasn't complicated.
Who's going to kind of put the numbers that I've described into context, talk about some of our big priorities and how it affects each of our divisions.
All right. Thank you, Sam. And I just
we
want to
still
take
have
a
an
moment
hour
and,
left.
Compliment Sam for stepping into the CFO role really
Crazy.
right as V1 budget process began, and actually after V1 budget process had began. And not only Sam, but Margaret and Lauren and others of the finance team for doing all the heavy lifting. I specifically want to thank Lucas, who's, I believe, still with us, sitting behind me from OFM, who knows our budget as well as anyone on our team, and has supported us at OFM throughout this whole process. So just thank you. And I know that if there are specific questions, if you want to get further in the weeds, we are more than prepared to do that. Also, don't want to belabor it to the point of putting everyone to sleep here. So with that, I will try to quickly make it through, as Sam described, sort of putting the context around these numbers and these investments so that you and the public can better understand, as I've tried to articulate a little more clearly, what it is we're seeking to do, what makes this budget different, how is this budget an articulation of our priorities, I believe our shared priorities with you all and with the public. So first and foremost, and you heard the mayor say this on Monday night, this entire budget and our budget is about people. And so first and foremost, this is about living within our means, but also making sure that we're putting enough money aside to negotiate a fair contract for our ASME laborers who support us.
The unions. You want to make sure you take care of the unions, because your unions were what helped Hogsett looked really good on Monday.
As Sam has alluded to, as you've heard, this does include a new Vision Zero administrator position. We are retooling in the operations division to add a traffic supervisor who will help specifically with safety and things of that nature on the traffic side from operations. We are expanding with additional personnel in the trail maintenance, on the trail maintenance team, as Sam referenced, moving from 8 to 10 personnel. We actually also retooled, just a small note, earlier this year, and we reprioritized a vacancy to add an additional crew leader. So that number went from 7 to 8, now to 10 over the course of this year in this budget, assuming passage. And then finally, you'll see on the bottom 3 boxes there, just again, a recap of our shared priorities we believe this year in this budget. Not only the significant capital investment that we briefly talked about, and we'll get in the weeds later on, but 30% of that capital program is dedicated to complete street and multimodal projects, projects that
Lovely.
fall within the Vision Zero category as defined by the MPO's Vision Zero toolkit. So we believe, as the community has called for action as it relates to Vision Zero, that we can prove here at DPW that we've been putting that plan to action over the last several years, and 30% of our capital program is going towards Vision Zero initiatives. Finally, then the program manager for green infrastructure and an additional forestry analyst. You've heard me talk about it. I don't know if the public's heard as much, but we are going to continue to prioritize dealing with the real-time impacts of climate change. We're going to continue to prioritize ensuring that as we think about design, as we think about a more modern Indianapolis and the investments we're making in our infrastructure in the future, that we have somebody dedicated to thinking about green infrastructure. And then finally,
how many of these ass clowns? Hey, you know what? He said that it took him an hour to get to work the other day. Is he riding a bike? Is he taking the bus? Is his car a hybrid or electric? Put your money where your mouth is, pal.
And it's one that we've been a part of over the last 2 years, I think prior to that, but since I came at the beginning of last year, I know that there's a strong push in our community to be mindful about conservation, to be mindful about tree canopy, to be mindful about protecting forests. And so the department has taken those concerns seriously. The department shares those concerns. And so you'll see as we walk through the capital plan, a $16.3 million investment in conservation, in trees and land stewardship that are new dollars in this capital plan, dedicating the resources that we have, again, back to the concept of living within our means, with the revenue sources we have towards these goals, towards these shared priorities. Next slide, Sam. So breaking it down division by division, which is how we compartmentalize our information internally. From the Policy and Planning's division, what does this budget mean? What does the future look like if we move forward together? This is going to allow us to continue the work of Vision Zero and planning out what that Vision Zero task force looks like, implementing a Vision Zero plan.
Oh my God, you guys are all the worst.
This is going to continue to allow us to implement community-powered infrastructure. And as we do that, it's going to allow us to continue the cost-sharing proposal that we've put before you with the investment in the lending library. And we also are going to, you'll see the next bullet point here, community engagement efforts. We're going to begin engaging. I made a commitment last year, and I'm following through on that commitment to, as we launch community-powered infrastructure, as we think about tactile urbanism and art in the right-of-way, we need to think about it equitably. So what are we doing, not just to share the information on our social media pages, share it with all of you, and then go home and sleep well at night knowing that we're doing good work? How can we go further, right? How can we actually go meet people in their communities, meet them where they are? So Zach is spearheading that effort and doing proactive outreach in communities that we haven't seen a lot of interest yet, but we know there will be interest in these programs.
Will there be?
And so if counselors have areas that you think we need to identify and prioritize in doing that type of outreach, we want to work with you on that. I believe the first outreach event is going to be out in the Far East Side at Cafe here in September.
In the middle of the day, probably.
You heard us talk about that last year. We were in the process of implementing Mobile M4. And what that means is our field investigators, the boots on the ground that are out there responding to the MAC calls, responding to the dispatch calls, responding to the things that you all send to me, and we need to get taken care of right away. Councilor Boots mentioned the issue at the intersection adjacent to the school, those type of things. Mobile N4 is going to allow us to better communicate in real time back what our folks are seeing in the field to the folks that are either at DPW engineering, in the office with DPW operations, or even across departments and across agencies, right? This will be more real-time data uploaded to the MAC. So if people are calling, asking for status updates on their cases, this is how we can provide better services and more efficient communication on their services. And then finally, under policy and planning, I already mentioned Kyle and the good work his team's doing. You can see here what this budget will allow us to continue to do. It allows us to continue to engage in new ways and think creatively about how we're doing that proactively, whether it's public meetings, whether it's online surveys, and how we can better communicate with folks here in a more modern 2024 when we think about project analysis, environmental analysis, things of that nature. Office of Sustainability, I will not belabor this because Morgan already came to the podium and walked through these various grant opportunities earlier, but we're excited to continue to see what the Office of Sustainability can do under Morgan's leadership, and from the department's perspective, eager to continue partnering with her, and I know other agencies and departments are beginning to think and challenge themselves to think more critically about how they can partner with the Office of Sustainability as we think about sustainability going beyond just DPW and being a more countywide, citywide office. At the engineering division level, again, this budget will allow us to invest in a new Vision Zero administrator.
Concrete
I've already
street
called attention to the
economic
reallocation of
all
existing FTEs. Mentioned the strategic land acquisition program, and we'll get into that when we get to the capital
$8 million
plan here in a moment. DOT software implementation, again, I think we highlighted where we are in that. It was a new investment in last year's budget, and calling attention to it again here. We highlighted the new residential streets program, eager to begin working with you all on prioritizing those neighborhoods in the not too distant future. Something of interest that I think all of you are cognizant of, but maybe the public isn't, is how challenging it has been historically for us to do concrete streets. Just given here in recent memory, the market for concrete being so cost prohibitive. There's a new, as I understand it, there's a new concrete plant that has opened up in southern Indiana. The price of concrete has lowered, and so John has been working on trying to get a contract in place so we can sort of strike while the iron's hot and put a concrete rehabilitation program together in short notice so that we can address some of those long-standing concrete needs in our community while we can take advantage of the lower pricing. The lower pricing probably won't stay forever, so it's probably something we're going to need to work on.
Or maybe it'll go
quickly,
lower.
but that's something that'll be new as part of this capital plan in this budget. Additionally, what will be new next year is having an on-call contract for a consultant to help us support economic development specifically. As Megan Viscich stepped into her role, and her and I coordinate on some of our
There's
more
a different
complex
department
and
for that,
important,
bud.
economic development projects. We realized that we could really use additional support, folks with subject matter expertise, so that I'm not constantly calling Nathan, asking him to pull somebody off of a project that has been committed in your district, maybe, to pull off of that because we need to prioritize this significant economic development project. So having an on-call contract will allow us to have that force multiplier so that we can react quickly and not lose an opportunity, but also not pull away from the bandwidth that we have within our own engineering division. And then finally, again, you can see here the increase from 2023 to 2024 in the MPO funding. And as Sam mentioned, we worked, Anna Gremling, Executive Director of the MPO, myself, Commissioner Hairbrandt from Hamilton County, and Mayor Myers from Greenwood, approached NDOT back in the summer, met with Commissioner Smith, had a good series of meetings, and they have agreed to extend the life of the state exchange program. That's something that was in jeopardy, and that is a big win for us. It's not worth here in the moment, given that it's getting later and later, getting into all the reasons why, but happy to unpack that for you if you're curious. That not only saves us money, it makes us more efficient.
It keeps getting later and later because you don't know how to shut the fuck up. You love to speak.
You can see here a list of the wins this year that are included in the capital plan that are sort of bonus funds, right? These are federal funds and other types of funding that we're excited to have. We did note, so I think most of these are known to everyone. We did note on the bottom some of the pending applications. So certainly we hope to continue to add to this list. We're not done yet as far as competing for.
Hey, this is actually very important. This Mars Hill pre-disaster mitigation. Yeah, experiencing flooding from the state ditch. Wait, they're not doing anything with that. That money is there. but they can't do anything because it still costs more than that. I think the last I checked it was like $10 million. So, oh, this is a total win. We got $1.4 million for this. Yeah, but it's still not going to get done.
For projects and competing for dollars across the country. Next slide. Operations division, again, we've discussed most of these. The Broom Bear and Broom Badger specifically, I know everyone will recall the visuals there, but we're making investments not just in our personnel, as Sam walked through and I've walked through, but we're making, again, significant investment in the tools and training that our folks need to do their jobs as well. At Fleet Services, you can see here some of the more fleshed out notes that Sam walked through. I would mention, and Jared couldn't be, Counselor Evans, forgive me, couldn't be here with us this evening, but a shout out to him. He has put us in touch with Wayne Township Career Center, and we've had some good initial conversations. I would encourage any of you, if you have resources in your district, if you have thoughts about ways that we could creatively try to build a pipeline, we are all ears. We do feel like this year we are postured well to set ourselves up for next year to hit the ground running when it comes to being able to offer more competitive wages as we go through the CBA process, because we know, as we did a market analysis last year into the beginning of this year, that our wages specifically at Fleet just aren't keeping up with the market. So we know that's going to give us an opportunity to
almost
get back
like
to competitive, and we think we can offer a more than competitive benefits
private
package,
wages are
so long
better.
as we can get to the folks. So if you all can help us figure out where we get to those folks so we can start telling that story, we're going to do our jobs to get that CBA renegotiated and be able to offer a more competitive value to potential candidates. From the solid waste division's perspective, again, the biggest news, most exciting news is the opportunity to move forward with a new garage in the coming year. Also, most significantly, for the purposes of our constituents, it's going to be getting in place these new hauler and disposal contracts. And then finally, you'll see here that not only have we added Kaylee to the team in the new administrator role, but we are also repurposing an existing FTE to create a superintendent position to further support at the administrative level solid waste. As there are so many changes coming, we felt it was the right thing to do to continue to add to that team to make sure that we manage those processes, because we know that come January 1st, 2026, there's any potential shift in services that's going to be a major burden. And before we get to the capital plan, I do want to take a few moments and walk through our budgeting for equity slides.
Oh, God, here we go.
You all know that having come from the council office, I was very involved at the beginning stages of what the council eventually called budgeting for equity, and am a huge supporter of being transparent with you all, being transparent with the public, and trying to hold ourselves accountable as we seek to make equity a forefront, have equity be at the forefront of our decision-making, our policy-making, our budgeting, and our contracting. So you can see here a transparent look at where we are today with hitting our XBE goals. If it's not front of mind for you, those goals are 15% MBE, 8% WB, 3% VBE, and 1% DOBE. And so you can see that we are meeting those expectations for MBE, far exceeding them for WBE. We're slightly low on VBE and meeting them, exceeding them on DOBE. I would mention, and you'll see these 2 bullet points underneath the chart, that this year we've been very intentional as a team. We have a scoring process. We're very thorough as far as it relates to selecting consultants for contracts for professional services. But part of that, we've baked equity into that process, and we've thought really hard about what are the right opportunities for an XBE to prime contracts with the department. And so this year we gave the first VBE prime contract to a designated VBE in the city. I hesitate to list specific consultant names here because I don't want this to become like a promotional video for them, but we did select a VBE for a prime this year, as well as a DOB for a prime this year that had not had that opportunity to prime with us in the past. And so just as I mentioned Powers & Sons being the CMC on the garage, I hope that that demonstrates to you, I hope that that demonstrates to the public how intentional we're being about this work, specifically on the contracting side. And with that, we can pivot to the staffing transparency slides here. And again, I won't belabor these, but as you'll note immediately, we have the most diverse workforce in the city. We're thankful for that.
How's that working out?
We celebrate that. We think that's a very good thing. We also acknowledge that there are deficiencies as it relates to
and they're making sure that about that too. They're making sure. Look at this. They're making sure they pay management average salary. They're making sure they pay white people less. That's like their goal. They want to make sure that they're paying them less. Even look at it, they have way more white managers. They have only one Hispanic manager. They have all the employees. They want to make sure they keep the white man down. Hey, I tell you what, you want to know why nobody wants to work for the city? Right there.
And in large part, that's because of the blue-collar versus white-collar nature of our workforces and how it's diversified. And so I would call attention to the fact that we have opportunity to make improvement here with the CBA, and I'm confident that we will. Beyond that, next slide, Sam. As we think specifically about gender diversity and gender equity, I would call attention to the fact that we've had a 4% growth in women managers in our workforce year over year.
They got to make sure. They have to make sure that they do have more managers. Otherwise, they're going to get bitched at by the council.
The females compensated at a very close range to their male counterparts. We did make progress as it relates to the gender equity gap that you see on the far.
There's only what the fuck is that all about? There's way less male employees than their average.
Upper right corner, and so want to continue.
I'm making sure I tell
be
everybody not to work for the state,
that
work
work
for
as
Marion County. Whenever people, actually, I get questions sometimes of like, well, should I work for them or should I work for a private company? And every single time I said, work for the private company. If you are not white, you're probably okay working for Marion County. But if you are white, go private because Marion County will totally fuck you. They are bound by affirmative action plans.
So what are we doing more specifically to drill down just a little bit on the staffing piece? Obviously, there's the CBA that I've already mentioned. We have ongoing recruitment and staffing challenges. On the engineering side specifically, I would call attention to the fact that the engineering workforce is not as diverse as our population. And so there's a woman, Holly Harrington, who I think many of you know. I know she serves on a couple of boards, I think, as a council appointee at the airport. She's very involved in some different trade associations and membership associations for women engineers and minority engineers. And so I'm working with her about seeing if the department can enter into any potential workforce development,
how much is she making?
Pipeline opportunities with the organizations that she's affiliated with, and certainly eager to learn if you all know of other partnerships or other things we could be doing proactive in that space. I won't belabor this. I won't read all of these slides to you, but you can see here some of the other
Damn!
Work.
She's making $195,000 as their knock it off as their affirmative action hire. No. Yeah, you can't. Look, 195. That's crazy.
We're doing as it relates to staffing. Thinking about barriers.
Your taxpayer money right there.
Start over just briefly.
You're welcome.
I believe all of you will have received the responses to all of the questions that the council gave to us, and so it was recommended not necessarily going through all of those questions, but rather calling attention to some specific highlights. So what you see here are the highlights that we wanted to impress upon you in the public.
Just end it already.
I think
Got
one of the
half an hour
conversations,
left.
one of the points about Vision Zero that's been lost through the conversation over the last several months is a conversation about equity. How when we think about our
Has it?
design and when we
Has
think
it?
about our most vulnerable road users, a large component of that is actually going to be a conversation about equity as well. And so I think that's another reason that that's a noble pursuit. I think it's another reason why we're taking the right step in creating the task force and eager to continue those conversations. From a community engagement perspective, I know I've touched on these in a couple different ways in other areas, but the team is going to continue to prioritize not just sharing information, but being proactive and intentional about how we reach out to the public and meet them where they are. And so you can see here just a listing of some of the other things we've touched on, and I won't belabor it at this point. One specific example of that is obviously the Henry Street Bridge project.
Yeah, what's going on with that?
The sort of the lesson learned over the last year and a half that maybe the old way of community engagement isn't necessarily the best way of community engagement. The team originally had sought to reach out to folks who were geographically in proximity to the project and not thinking about the historical context and broader, more diverse audiences that also cared about the history of the site, not specifically just the infrastructure and the impact that the infrastructure may have on adjacent residents. And so I'm incredibly proud of the work that Deputy Mayor Thomas has supported as we stood up a community advisory group to help inform the Henry Street Bridge process. I think it's something that all of you know well, and again, thank you to Chairwoman Jones for her support along the way in helping us execute ultimately what I hope will be a successful project for the near west side. And finally, Sam teased this earlier, but wanted to call out the USDA Urban Forestry Grant. Again, you've heard us talk about this a little bit. I know there's been some interest from the press in this program, but we haven't really gotten into the weeds. And this program is all about historical inequities in trying to address those historical inequities as it relates to tree canopy, to the urban heat index, and thinking about neighborhoods that perhaps once had trees but no longer had trees, and how do we increase that tree canopy? How do we address those tree canopy issues? And so this is another project that Shannon is in charge of for us and going to lead the way on. And if folks have specific questions on that, I'm certain that Shannon will be able to answer those questions for you as we think about where specifically those investments will be made and what census tracts are eligible. So with that, we'll launch into the capital plan, and you can see here the spreadsheet that we put together every year for you all. This is now updated from last year's. This will go on our website so that the public can see it as well. This first slide is all of the revenue coming in over the next year, or excuse me, over the next 5 years. I would note that these are a lot of times our most educated assumptions and guesses in the moment. It's hard to say with real certainty what's going to happen all the way out in 2028. But as we work to plan for 2028 and as we work to put contracts in place and start designing for 2028, we need to have an accounting of what we believe revenue sources will be so that we can start to think about cash flow and things of that nature. I would call out here specifically the, forgive me, New Transportation LOC, the final road just before other local funds there. That is the debt issued earlier this year that the council approved. And I take a moment to note that for one specific reason. We're getting to a point where we are exhausting our ability to issue debt in a responsible way. And we're getting to a point where you're going to start to see, you're starting to see it here, those revenue numbers flatline over time, because we're getting to a point where we've been as creative as we can be with existing revenue sources. So we're going to continue to aggressively pursue funding. We're going to continue to, I believe, punch above our weight because we've got a great team that's serious, that's thoughtful, that makes data-driven decisions. But we're going to get to a point where we have to have the conversation about more revenue because that's what's coming. It's not tomorrow. This isn't to scare anyone. It's not today. But in the 5 years, when we start to look at this, we're going to get to that point, and that's going to sneak up on us if we're not careful.
Here's a thought. maybe you should stop wasting money with some of these programs, some of these positions, some of these departments inside of the department. Why don't you think about doing that?
You can still see there the total on the bottom right.
We don't have enough money.
That we have
Well,
a nearly $1 billion transportation capital plan over the next 5 years. On the next slide, you see an accounting of the expenditures. So what does that nearly $1 billion get us over the next 5 years? I won't belabor this. So next slide, Sam. Same representation here on the stormwater side. And again, the call out of the $12 million USDA grant. So that's new money coming in that'll be managed under the stormwater team. And I would note there at bottom right, that's $213 million worth of investment on the stormwater side over the next 5 years. Finally, the stormwater capital plan. This is again where I'd point to that $16.3 million total. So on the revenue side, you saw the $12 million coming in from the USDA forestry grant. And here you're seeing $4.3 million allocated towards strategic land acquisition and stewardship. This is the pool of resources that we have identified to be able to draw from moving forward for strategic land acquisition, just as we saw, thankful for your all final passage on Monday night, the ability to move forward with the $360,000 this year for the expansion of Grassy Creek Park and protecting that land from future development. Next slide, Sam. This will be new in this year's budget presentation, and is how we're starting to attempt to do our best in real time to respond to the call for more transparency as it relates to Vision Zero, more transparency as it relates to pedestrian safety and the investments we're making across the county. I know there's been a substantial call for investment in Vision Zero in this year's budget. Our argument is that this is our investment, that we've been planning for this investment. We've been implementing the Complete Streets Ordinance. We've been working with the MPO on the Vision Zero toolkit. And so what you see here is a breakdown of the different elements in that 5-year capital plan that all meet the test of the Vision Zero toolkit. Put that another way, if the Vision toolkit is prescribing this is how you tackle pedestrian safety, this is how you implement Vision Zero, these are the ways our capital plan are already doing that over the next 5 years. 30% of our transportation capital plan is dedicated towards Vision Zero and complete street and multimodal projects. That's $305 million, which Sam, you can turn to the next slide. You can see a visual, no, that's fine. You can see a visual representation of on this map. And so this was the map that we had a draft version for you back in July. And the only change we've made, the addition that we've made, is we incorporated those 75 different intersections that in the event that you want to take that $1 million investment from the fiscal proposal 283, assuming final passage in September, that is what the map would look like with the existing projects in our 5-year capital plan and those 75 intersections as represented visually on the map of the county. So finally, again, you can see here now the totals when you incorporate both the transportation and stormwater revenue coming in over the next year. You can see this year, $271 million total. Next year, $268 million. I think it passes the smell test to say that we've been able to flatline despite that this is a live within our means budget. And you can see this historic trend line and how we've trended up, but we're getting to that point where we're starting to flatline. And so again, long term, we're going to need to continue that conversation at the State House. We're going to need to continue to have that conversation about meaningful investment in our city's infrastructure. And that takes us to the last slide. This is a more easily understandable graphic representation of that 5-year capital plan. And I'll call attention to the box on the bottom, the light blue shaded box. Again, in thinking about how we communicate better, how we're more transparent, how we're more forthcoming with the public and with ourselves about the way we're being intentional about safety, the way we're being intentional about working together. we added that additional visual representation. Just to be clear, this is a document that I carry around in my binder and everywhere I go, and anyone that asks me about what's DPW doing, where are you investing, this is one of the slides that I always pull out and show folks. And so this is going to be something that we continue to incorporate in sort of our vernacular, and how we communicate with you all in the public is how we're being intentional about safety and long-term investments in safety. That takes us to the end of our presentation.
Thank you, Director Herget. Questions? Councilor Roberts?
Oh, boy.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I got 20 minutes.
Excuse me, a couple comments really quick. First of all, I love the idea of partnering with the different high school career centers. I know we have in Lawrence Township, the McKenzie Career Center, Washington Township has one too, and I'd be glad to make those connections. Just a quick question about the complete neighborhood approach that you mentioned. I love the idea of stretching our dollars further and being creative with that. But I was wondering, I mean, first of all, have you decided which areas you're going to be each year? Is that something that's been decided yet, or is that still up in the air?
When you say which areas, which year, do you mean?
Like there's like the Northeast. Yeah, have you decided what's going to be when?
So, John, I defer to you if we already have determined which sector.
I would be surprised if they had a plan.
I don't believe so, no.
Okay. And with that being
There
said,
we go.
does that mean that, like, how much is this going to be the complete neighborhood streets approach, or are we still doing kind of the classic style in addition to this? So, I mean, are we going to have 3 or 4 years where we're getting nothing, or is it just an add-on to what we already have? Like, how does that work in terms of the current style that we do for residential streets? I'm still learning as a new counselor, but how does that work with our current style too?
Yeah, so given that there was no dedicated revenue source historically, there's no program. Like, we have a program for bridges, we have a program for culverts, we have a program for thoroughfares, obviously. So there's been no program for residentials. So the residentials that are existing in the pipeline from the 3 original fiscals, those are still going to be completed. There's no change there. We're not going to stop a project. But after those 3 fiscals, after that money runs out, with these new dollars, with this new revenue stream, this will be the process moving forward. And so we'd really have to get into the weeds and look at specific projects, and if District 4 still has elements that are, outstanding, well then maybe those would happen in certain years. But what this new approach will mean is that districts will see a neighborhood done on a 4-year cycle, and there will not be other residential streets moving forward. Again, given the scarcity of funds, when we have $16 million a year to allocate,
stop wasting money.
That's the solution that's going to work for the entire county, so that we can think about delivering residential roads in an equitable way across the entire county.
Thank you.
Councilor Nielsen?
This is why the GOP made sure that I wasn't going to win my primary. Because if I won my primary, I would have beat McCormick, and I would be calling out Hergy every second that I get about how much wasted tax money.
Sharon, great questions, Councilor Roberts. You took what I was going to ask first, so that'll be quick. So first on the street sweeping side, I know you said you were this budget proposal includes the acquisition of some new equipment. Will that include enhanced service, or or is this more of a capital management exercise for this budget?
Thank you. That's a great question. And if we get into very detailed specifics, I'm going to defer to our administrator of that section of the operations division, Tim Cochran, who's here. But in general, this is we have equipment that is in some cases very old and very costly to maintain and inefficient to maintain. So, I would view this as a replacement.
Maybe we should just start privatizing everything.
Equipment that needs to be replaced. Now, of course, when you're purchasing newer
maybe
equipment,
we should
it comes
separate
with
it out where people have certain contracts. I don't know.
More efficient in many ways, but it's not a change in policy to how we approach street sweeping in general. And the other thing I'll say is, we called it out in both the quarterly presentation and the budget presentation. While we are buying it this year, these are procured through lease purchase agreements that we work through a state program called the HELP program through the Indiana Bond Bank. We get very favorable rates through that program. Allows us to procure this equipment at a reasonable cost. And so the lease payments are budgeted in 2025 and beyond to cover the cost of these purchases.
Thank you. That's helpful. And I know that in September we have review and analysis, so I'll keep some of my comments about the budget for that time. But I just wanted to emphasize a point that the director made as it relates to revenue. And I would just really encourage my colleagues to, as we're looking through all of these slides, really be mindful of the impact of user fees, and especially our county's optional excise wheel tax, and just the effect that is having, I think, on a financial side going forward, and on a political side in order to be able to leverage additional funds. So I'll have some more comments in September, but I'm hopeful that this committee, under Chairwoman Jones' leadership, we really can bring people together to have a very serious and intentional conversation about how we bring more revenue online for what is arguably the issue that all of us hear the most about. So thank you, Madam Chair.
So Andy wants to raise taxes. The trust fund baby wants to raise taxes. Why am I not surprised? Instead of, like, tightening the belt or getting rid of wasteful positions in DPW, no, we want to waste more of your money.
Thank you. Councilor Bain.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Director and Sam, for the very thorough presentation. I'm looking at the end of the budget presentation where you have the slide about other local funds. And I don't know if this is the answer that I'm looking for, but we have a lot of dedicated funds that go to infrastructure. How much of the general fund dollars does the city put towards infrastructure? So funds that are not earmarked and dedicated for infrastructure, how much of that are we having to pull away from other resources to pay for our basic infrastructure needs?
Sure. Thank you. Councilor Bain, I can give you a general answer. We also have our budget manager, Lucas Anderson, who is extremely knowledgeable about the city's budget more generally. What you're seeing in the capital plan, the other local funds, you're correctly pointing out, this is summarizing resources beyond state road formula funding and the wheel tax. So in this total, you have local income tax dollars that have been appropriated directly to the department. You see that $15 million in 2024 and $7 million in 2025. The prior commitments from Circle City Forward Phase 3 money, which was for trails, which is still being spent down. That's also money that was appropriated by the council outside of our normal dedicated revenues. And then the parking meter fund, which is dedicated funding for DPW, but not specifically earmarked for transportation. So you're looking at those correctly. The one thing I will call out is the debt, the transportation line of credit, which does show up in that category. That's being paid back with transportation funding. So while it shows up there, it's kind of a gray area. Which way do you want to categorize it? I don't know if Lucas wants to get in specifics of how much of the city's total general fund budget these allocations represent, or if that's even a fair thing to ask him to do right now, but he's standing up, so he's accepted the challenge.
Challenge is probably the applicable word to this. And Counselor, I will admit I deal primarily with non-public safety or criminal justice agencies, so I only deal with about half of the overall city-county $1.65 billion budget. Historically, as both Director Herget and CFO Barris have indicated, DPW has more or less been regulated towards the revenues that are there for their dedicated mission-specific services. However, the city has been able to, over my tenure at least with the city-county over about 7 years, been able to do numerous one-time appropriations towards transportation specifically. I don't even want to hazard the guess, but I would say in excess of $200 to $300 million over that 7-year period, and I believe that I am truly understating that. In terms of the operational budget, we currently are looking at about a $56,000 net surplus. In terms of our other revenue growth outside of DPW's dedicated funds, we are seeing the same type of limited growth. and also taking into account the notable outlier that Controller Reardon shared with all members of this committee and the council at whole, union negotiations with all of our major city-county unionized team members that are at the forefront, at least, of OFM's mind in developing the overall city-county budget.
Okay, yeah, thank you for going into further detail on that. And then the slide right after that one, where we're looking there at the chart, and at the bottom it says economic development, almost $55 million for this year, $90 million next year for economic development via the transportation capital plan. What are some examples of what economic development would be via the DPW budget?
So I can give you an example of the type of project that's categorized under that and why the totals might be so big and why they might fluctuate so much. In terms of a full listing of what projects we have in that category, we obviously can get you supplemental information. I don't want to dive into that here, but things like site development around the Elanco project that's not backed by general fund dollars or by DPW specific funding, but might be backed by TIF money or some other private source, but that's flowing through the city. Those would be the types of things that would show up in that category.
Yeah, and to supplement that, I can speak to specifically 2024. I know that a 75–80% of that alone is the White River Innovation District. So that's the Henry Street Bridge that's supporting the Elanco development. And that's all supported by the White River Innovation District, TIF district, and that funding source. So those economic development numbers are not taking away. This is the exact conversation, just translated differently, that we had at Admin and Finance the other night, right? Where those revenue sources are not drawing from our revenue sources that we have to support the entire city's infrastructure. Those are unique revenue sources supporting specific projects.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, you saw where I was going with that. And just the last thing, it's more of a big picture approach. And I know we continue to talk about road funding formula, and I get very leery when it feels like that we're putting all of our eggs in the basket of seeing the road funding formula get adjusted. And I think it's more of a hypothetical for us to assume that it does change versus it remaining the same. And I think that's two words: rural districts across Indiana.
Bingo.
And a majority of the legislators represent those districts. So has there even been a discussion about what does the city do? We're heading towards a fiscal cliff, as you've mentioned. What do we do when the state doesn't change the road funding formula? Are there any discussions around, like, what's the nuclear option? What do we do in order to make up, the huge funding gaps? If we go back to the HNTB study that's years old, the pre-inflation number was over $600 million for us to just handle thoroughfares, bridges, residential streets. If you added in sidewalks, it was over $1 billion. And again, that's pre-inflation, so it could be close to $1 billion every year that we have to be spending just to maintain what we have.
Probably more like $1.5 billion. It's probably what the current budget is right now.
So we're funding 20 to 25% of what the need is. So what is the nuclear option?
Yeah, so
they don't have an answer.
It's a great question, Counselor, and it's something that I think keeps DPW up at night. We're 100% aware of the challenge that is in front of us. I would point out to what I said a moment ago, which is in the near term, we have the resources that we need to continue to manage the infrastructure that we're tasked with managing. And so I think in the near term, we're also hopeful that the process that the state started last year with the task force will bring some sort of resolution that we can work together on. I hear what you're saying about the challenges that present themselves at the General Assembly. They're not lost on us. We've done a lot of hard work over the last few years trying to build relationships, trying to put together the best case that we can. And so the mayor put forward a proposal last year that we've continued to have conversations at the State House level with both leadership and individual members about. And I think we're optimistic that we're going to continue those conversations into next year, into a budget session, and maybe see some change. Certainly no promises. Certainly.
So there is no
crystal
nuclear
ball,
option. You're
but
just talking.
We were given a path forward to have those conversations. We're going to continue those.
Blah,
we're going to take
blah,
that opportunity.
blah.
And I think just as we've punched above our weight with the MPO, just as we've been very competitive at the federal level, my hope is that we can make a credible case to the General Assembly why investing in Marion County's infrastructure is just as important as investing across all 92 counties.
But you don't care.
That those two pressures aren't mutually
But you're not
exclusive.
focused on the
I think
infrastructure.
that that's a case that can be made, and I think that we have willing partners at the General Assembly that want to help us make that case.
Okay, yeah, I guess I'll just wrap up by maybe pushing back a little bit on the fact of how, we're
He
good
doesn't
in the
have an
near
answer
term.
to.
Because if we're funding roughly $270 million, and in order for us to just maintain what we had a few years ago, pre-inflation numbers, was going to be over double that, we're guaranteeing that roads are going to continue to get worse year over year. Every year that I've been on the council, we have approved a budget that guarantees roads will be in worse condition the following year than the present year. And I don't know how we can kick that can down the road.
I think it's a point well made. My rebuttal would be, look at where we were in 2016 and 2017. Look at that trend line. Sam, if you go back, I think 2 slides. Where we started and where we are today by working together, by prioritizing this issue together in the way that we have, we've grown that budget substantially. Are there still challenges? Absolutely. Do we still have room to grow? Absolutely. I think we can get there together.
I see it. I do see us going from 80 million to 130 to 250. But last year there was an amendment put forward in a committee that would have labeled Indianapolis a distressed unit of government. Something that's only been happened, I think, twice to Gary and Muncie. And if that happens, because I think we are a distressed unit, you look at the fact that we underfunded, we're fund roughly a third of our need. We kind of are a distressed unit of government. It does not help the city of Indianapolis for the state to label us a distressed unit of government. We would never be able to borrow anything for decades if they did that. But I think that's the point that we're at, is the fact that we can't afford to pay the bills that we have and meet the need of our citizens.
So true. So true. And the fact that DPW keeps adding positions to their department, and they're like, well, hey, we got these new stuff. We're going to focus on Vision Zero. We're going to focus on the forest. But, we don't know how we're going to cover all the bills. I didn't know about the distress thing. That's funny.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. A comment and a couple questions. One, I've been mentioning this at every budget hearing.
If you mention the road funding, I'm going to lose my mind.
Following Councilor Bain's point and other points, this city needs to find more revenue in general without raising taxes. Every department needs to be very innovative and creative and figure out how to increase revenue, whether it's through user fees, greater grant recipient programs, what have you, because we have been drunk these last 3 years on federal money.
Yeah.
So much of it is drying up, and reality is hitting, and now we're waking up the next day with a hangover. And so we really need to look for creative ways. So I just encourage everybody, and I'm going to repeat this speech at every hearing, we need to get more revenue in this city. So enough said. Residential program, following Councilor Roberts' question.
Oh, damn, that's hilarious.
And maybe he was going there.
Hold on, shut up. Check this out. It was back in 23. You can find it. There's a paywall. You can go find a paywall. There's back ways around it. Anyway, so last March of 23, there's an amendment for it. Bob Baining, who lives in Josh's Bain's district, that's like his big area. And I did not know this. This is so funny. in 2019 data found the city needs $635 million in additional annual funding to maintain its road. Just for inflation increase. Oh, okay. So this is where he's getting all. Oh, interesting. This is why there was an amendment, because they don't want Indianapolis to be a distressed. Yeah, so they want to raise taxes. They just want to raise taxes because they can't get their shit. That's so.
I understand the exclusive neighborhoods. You're going to get one neighborhood in your district every 4 years. But that's from a residential perspective. We're still going to have the program of arteries and major thoroughfares and things, strip patching.
Are we?
Other main roads, if you will, receiving sufficient care.
Yes, that program has not changed. That's just that $16 million of new revenue on top of, prior to the Senate Bill 283 change, that new $16 million in revenue moving forward. That's how we'll plan on spending that money moving forward.
Exclusively residential.
Exclusively residential. State statute dictates that.
Yeah.
So Senate Bill 283, in some ways, was an unfunded mandate. It not only fixed the road funding formula population to the tune of approximately $8 million a year, but then it required that the city come up with $8 million in match and then spend all $16 million on residential streets. So we do not have an option. We shall do that by state statute.
Good. That's how it should be. This is actually what my bitch has been the whole time. Sure, you'll get your road funding, but it can only be spent on repairing the roads. But then they'll have the extra money to do bullshit programs. I think there should be an amendment that you have to kill DEI training.
So the $8 million from the increased road formula, that's new money, but the other $8 million is out of our own skin.
Right, and if you look here and you look at last year's appropriation, that's coming from COIT, which is part of those other local revenue sources. That.
To be fair, like in the big scheme of things, $8 million isn't that much compared. You have a $1.6 billion budget.
Councilor Bain mentioned.
Yeah, thanks. Final question. On this USDA grant, the $12 million grant, can those funds be used to protect existing forests in challenged census tracts?
Yes, hypothetically. I think, Councilor Boots, you and I have discussed this at length and certainly appreciate your interest and share the concern. I think we would need to look at a case-by-case basis, because when we're talking about the stormwater user fee, we're talking about a revenue source that we have to be mindful of its intended use. And so if there were a genuine stormwater need and a genuine stormwater benefit to purchasing those parcels, we could absolutely investigate a parcel such as that.
But is that stormwater $1 million set aside, that's separate from this USDA grant, correct?
Correct, yes.
Yeah. Okay. My understanding of and maybe I'm misunderstanding it, the USDA grant, my understanding is that it is to go to challenge census tracts for the purposes of preserving and expanding tree canopy to address heat island effect.
Yes, that's correct. So it's a federal program administered through the U.S. Department of Agriculture, USDA, and that program dictates how we spend those dollars. And so they are intended for specific census tracts based on need, and those underserved census tracts are defined by the federal government. And then in those census tracts where there is a lack of tree cover, where there is a heat island effect as a result of that lack of tree cover, we are going to partner with Keep Indianapolis Beautiful and other local partners on planting new trees and growing and increasing the tree canopy in the urban core. And so that's how that program was built. That's how our grant application read, and that's now how we shall again spend that $12 million.
So it sounds though like that program would not accommodate the acquisition of existing forest land.
No, forgive me if I misheard your original question. The USDA grant has nothing to do with land acquisition.
Yeah, all right. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any further questions from councilors?
Got a minute left.
Anyone from the public who wishes to speak on the budget hearing? All right, thank you, Director Herget, and your
Finally
phenomenal
made it,
dedicated
boys.
team
We
for your-
finally
your
made
time
it.
and your thoughtful budget presentation. Motion to adjourn?
Finally. That is mighty fascinating. Mighty fascinating. So now we know it's, you know what, and according to that article, even Boehning is saying, like, you're going to have to raise taxes to take care of it. What if the state bought some of the roads? They can manage them. Like Rockville Road past 465 is a state road. And they maintain it. They maintain it way better than Indianapolis does, than DPW does. For very interesting stuff. You know, knowing that Marion County city councilors can say, hey, I want your home and I'm going to put a park on it and I got $1 million, and they can just do that. That is very terrifying, because we know that communist Jesse Brown will surely do that. He would if he wants to. He could say that he won't, but and you can do it in any district. So wild. But, you know, see what happens. There's a lot going on still, a lot to talk about. This will continue, and they will bitch about the road funding while still wasting money. Anyway, until next time.